President Trump has warned Turkey, President Erdogan that foreign interference is complicating the situation in Libya. It comes after Turkey TV's approved a bill allowing the military to be deployed to interfere in Libya, civil war in support of the UN-backed government in Tripoli. The United States is to ban a number of popular e-cigarette flavors to curb the rising use of vaping products among teenagers. However, menthol and tobacco flavors will be allowed to remain on the market, and large refillable vaping devices are completely exempt from the ban. At least 5 people were killed and several others wounded when Sudanese Security forces opened fire on demonstrators in Khartoum and elsewhere in the country Saturday. The Sudan Doctors Committee said 4 people died from gunshots and 1 suffocated from tear gas in Khartoum and Omdurman on Saturday. Several other protesters were wounded, including from gunshots. The rallies came 2 days after military coup leader General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan reappointed himself the head of the Sovereign Council, Sudan's interim governing body. Thursday's move angered the pro-democracy alliance and, frustrated, the United States and other countries that have urged the military to reverse its coup and to restore civilian rule. Hi everybody. This weekend, we'll dedicate the newest American icon on our national mall, the National Museum of African American History and Culture. It's a beautiful building, 5 stories high and some 70 feet below the ground, situated just across the street from the Washington Monument. And this museum tells a story of America that hasn't always taken a front seat in our national narrative. As a people, we've rightfully passed on the tales of the giants who built this country. But too often, willful or not, we've chosen to gloss over or ignore entirely the experience of millions upon millions of others. But this museum chooses to tell a fuller story. It does gauze up some bygone era or avoid uncomfortable truths. Rather, it embraces the patriotic recognition that America is a constant work in progress, that each successive generation can look upon our imperfections and decide that it is within our collective power to align this nation with the high ideals of our founding. And one particular crop, almond in the US and now in Australia, is transforming the world of beekeeping and of bees. What has happened is that something serendipitous came along, that people found out, that doctors found out that almonds are good for you, a confection, but it's good for you. The almond board got a very aggressive promotion going on for almonds. They actually, I just heard recently, send out sales reps to cardiologists at hospitals to promote the heart benefits of almonds. I'm a very good promotion of almonds, and it's legitimate promotion because they are a healthy food. It is me 100 years since that great Canadian bomb physician Sir William Oslex Regis, Professor of Medicine in Oxford, complained about the increasing influence of the pharmaceutical industry on the medical profession. He would be turning in his grave at the way the industry now dominates doctors' prescribing habits. It does this not only by direct and indirect pressure on the doctors themselves, but also by encouraging the public to ask for scripts. Dave Hackenberg, a beekeeper since 1962, can usually tell what killed his bees just by looking at them. If they're lying on the ground in front of a hive, it probably pesticide, he says. If the bees are deformed and wingless, it probably vampire mites. But last fall, Hackenberg saw something he had never seen before. Thousands of his bee colonies simply disappeared. He was in Florida at the time, pulling the lids off some of his commercial hives. To his horror, they were all empty. Jack Nicholson, playing the crazed caretaker in The Shining, makes me reach for a blanket. Now a study finds that people we find, well, creepy can actually make us feel colder. The research will be published in the journal, Psychological Science. Researchers interviewed 40 college undergraduates. During each interaction, the experimenter was either chummy with the student or very stiff and professional. The investigator also altercated between mimicking students. Postum, a signal of rapport and not doing anything at all. Participants then completed a questionnaire designed to find out how hot or cold they felt. The results showed that the subjects actually felt colder when the investigator acted inappropriately or sent mixed signals. The researchers conjecture that because the brain tries to interpret social cues and purely physical ones, simultaneously, people unconsciously associate icy stares and chilly interactions with actual physical coldness. The next time you have to visit your doctor with the creepy receptionist, bring a sweater. Dogs are not just man's best friend. Previous studies have shown that kids with dogs are less likely to develop asthma. Now a new study may show how, if results from mice apply to us. The work was presented at a meeting of the American Society for Microbiology. The study tests what's called the hygiene hypothesis. The idea is that extreme D-dotliness may actually promote disease later on. Researchers collected dust from homes that had a dog. They fed the house dust to mice. They then infected the mice with a common childhood infection called respiratory syncytial virus or RSV. Macular degeneration causes visual distortion and even complete loss of sight. When the wife of chemistry Nobel laureate Walter Kohn was diagnosed with macular degeneration, he wanted to do something. I spoke with him at the recent Lindau Nobel laureate meeting in Germany. We are developing a corrective device, including interaction with the patient, who is following a certain routine and who tells us his perceptions that arise. A macular degeneration patient looks at a completely regular grid on a computer screen. But because of the condition, the grid will appear distorted. The patient uses a mouse to adjust the grid to appear normal. We will receive from the patient an edited piece of graph paper. And from the way the patient edits it, we can tell what the distortions are that he perceives, and from these, we can then develop devices that correct his distortions. Most of our serious illnesses and deaths in the U.S. now come from preventable diseases, such as heart disease. But we know what works to improve health. A new report recommends 43 changes that can make big improvements. To arrive at their recommendations, researchers reviewed more than 1,000 studies of public health. Their findings are in the American Heart Association journal Circulation. Some of the suggestions, such as tightening restrictions on smoking, are already paying off in many areas. Others, such as increasing taxes for unhealthful foods, might face stiff opposition, but could pay off large dividends in health savings later. But some surprisingly simple suggestions could be easiest to institute. Try extending the hours for public parks and schools' recreation facilities. Or improving sidewalks and visual appeal of neighborhoods to make people want to walk, bike, or run there more often. The authors of the paper argue that the next step is just for policymakers to put these changes into action. Let's say you've saved up 200 grand for a trip to space with Virgin Galactic. Lucky you. But are you healthy enough to fly? You'll have to talk with your doctor. A new study in the BMJ outlines the role that general practitioners will have to play in commercial spaceflight. After all, astronauts typically have to be in tip-top shape. But opening the door to the paying public means that less healthy individuals will soon have access to space, too. And the stress of spaceflight, combined with the negative effects of weightlessness on muscle and bone, could cause real problems. It may be up to your personal physician to make the go/no-go call based on your medical history. Among the potential hypotheticals floated in the BMJ study, can my patient with stable angina and a pacemaker for complete heart block participate in a suborbital Virgin Galactic flight? What is the maximum allowable time that my patient with osteoporosis can spend on a planned vacation at a space hotel? There are no official answers, yet. But the study's authors note that such questions may be in the air, or lack thereof, in the not-too-distant future. Ronald Cotton went to prison for rape. The victim picked him from a lineup convinced she was accurate. She picked him again years later when his case was reopened. The second lineup included the actual rapist. After 11 years behind bars, Cotton was later exonerated by DNA evidence. Experts say that the current lineup format pressures witnesses to identify a suspect, even when they lack confidence. So researchers are trying to improve the accuracy of such identifications. One recent study had more than 900 participants watch a short film of a staged crime. Up to a week after watching the film, the viewers looked at photos of suspects one at a time and rated how confident they were about each one's guilt. Half of the participants could take as long as they wanted to look at the photos. The other half had to decide within a few seconds, and the fast group was up to 66% more accurate. The study is in the Journal of Psychological Science. Strong memories are accessed more quickly than weak memories, which may explain why choosing fast tends to mean choosing right. Another factor that's putting the standard police lineup itself on trial. Unless you're at a Chaucer convention, speaking Middle English is not going to impress a potential romantic partner in 2013. Similarly, male savanna sparrows have to make sure their vocalizations are up to date. Researchers analyzed 3 decades of recordings of male savanna sparrows. And birds that changed their tune over the years did better with the ladies. The research is in the journal Animal Behavior. While introductory notes of the sparrow's song stayed the same, the middle and end parts changed over time. In the 1980s, songs concluded with longer, high-pitched trills. More recent songs contain a series of clicks in the middle and a shorter, low-pitched trill at the end. Researchers found that the male sparrows that adopted the newer songs had higher rates of sexual reproduction. Because you don't want to be seen as behind the times. Indeed, Chaucer might have had his pick of the ladies in the 14th century. But few today can make heads or tails of his tales. In animals, a movement is coordinated by a cluster of neurons in the spinal cord called the central patterns generator, CPG. This produces signals that drive muscles to contract rhythmically in a way that produces running or walking, depending on the pattern of pulses. A simple signal from the brain instructs the CPG to switch between different modes, such as going from a standstill to walking. Financial markets swung wildly yesterday in frenzied trading market by further selling of equities and fears about an unraveling of the global carry trade. At the same time, trading in the European credit markets in London was exceptionally heavy as traders frantically reassessed their appetite for risk, prompting wild swings in the prices of the key derivatives. It was the third day of frenetic activity in the European credit markets, suggesting that equity market swings were prompting a wider repositioning of investors in a host of asset classes. Well, Alex, the National Association of Realtors is at least putting the champagne on ice. The industry group says the slight rise in sales for previously owned homes shows the housing market is finally stabilizing, which is the first sign of a recovery. Now, that, of course, is an interpretation of the numbers, Alex, and one that's coming from an organization known for being somewhat of a cheerleader for the housing market, since its members are made up of realtors who've been losing a lot of money in the slump. Now, for a more sober view, I talked to Wellesley housing economist Carl Case, and he says the slight uptick in sales hardly offsets the fact that numbers are down 20% from the year before. A recent World Bank research revealed that automation will disrupt the pattern of the traditional economic path from productive agriculture stage to light manufacturing stage and then to full-scale industrialization stage and increase job losses in developing countries, particularly in India and China and part of Africa. Spanish police say they have identified the driver of the van that mowed down crowds walking along Barcelona's main tourist street last Thursday, killing 13 people. They haven't named him, but he's understood to be Younes Abayacoub, a 22-year-old born in Morocco. Police say he may have fled the country. A South African court has given permission for an online auction of rhino horns despite a global trade ban. The authorities have tried to stop the 3-day auction. There's a great demand for rhino horns in Vietnam and China with their use in traditional medicines. The South African government has confirmed that it granted diplomatic immunity to Zimbabwe's First Lady, Grace Mugabe, enabling her to return home despite being accused of assaulting a model in Johannesburg. The government said it was imperative to maintain good relations with Zimbabwe. The U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID, recently announced additional assistance to support achieving the goals outlined in the Bilateral Development Objectives Assistance Agreement between the U.S. and Nigerian governments signed in 2015. $25 million will strengthen good governance by supporting state governments' efforts to bolster Nigeria's open government partnership commitments to improve transparency and fight corruption. An additional $1.5 million will support a healthier, more educated population in targeted states through the U.S. President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, also known as PEPFAR, for a total of $26.5 million in additional assistance. The U.S. and South Korea announced late Saturday the two countries will end annual large-scale joint military exercises as part of diplomatic efforts to achieve complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. In a statement, the Pentagon said Acting Secretary of Defense Patrick Shanahan and South Korea Minister of National Defense in a phone call Saturday decided to end the Key Resolve and Full Eagle series of exercises. The decision comes 3 days after a summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Vietnam that ended without an agreement to resolve the North Korean nuclear crisis. Seoul's defense ministry released a similar statement, according to the Associated Press.